What's up, Internet? This is JG Zinf here with the Fringe Space Project, and we're going to try and cover today in one shot how to get Tachyon the Fringe multiplayer working again for everybody from Windows XP on up to Windows 10 and so on and so forth in between. Few things to cover initially is why do we need to fix multiplayer? Basically, NovaLogic, the company behind Tachyon, moved their server hosting that they've farmed out to a third-party company for a while now, several times over the last 10 years plus. And along the way, of course, each time they changed companies, the IP address of the server that we have to connect to changed. Now, initially, NovaLogic never updated this when they went to using companies like Steam and other places. They used to have game rental companies like GameTap that would have their system, and they couldn't update the IP address, I guess, themselves, so they more or less dropped support for it. Over time, we figured out what the IP address was and why it wasn't working, so we updated it and put out patches and kept things going for a pretty long time. Well, as things progressed, the IP address, like I said, ended up changing, and we had a problem with that, being that it got too long. See, here is the hex code of the exe, and you can see here it's 72.67.0.24, and which is fairly short. There's not, it's not triple digits all the way down. And you can see here, I've been told this isn't exactly the right address, but it worked for some time. The current one is 207.178.209.202. Much longer. It doesn't fit in the space properly. It causes instability in the exe. It just doesn't work. Thanks to the way Tachyon is set up, you can essentially go to the lobby, but you can't host a game without it either crashing or just being unstable and being a pain in the butt. So, instead, we've come up with another method using the LAN mode that Tachyon has in it. But there's a couple of workarounds we have to do. And the reason why is that LAN mode in Tachyon, unlike a lot of games nowadays, back around 99 it was kind of common. StarCraft had it, other major games had it, and were later given patches that worked it out of. But LAN mode uses the IPX protocol. Everything on the internet goes around using protocols in order for computers to talk to each other, and IPX was one that was meant for more so corporate networks, businesses, all within their building. It wasn't meant to go out really over the internet and try long distance communication. That's what TCP/IP was developed for, because it's got error correction in it, and that was a much better fit. What ended up happening is after Windows XP, essentially the company behind IPX, Novell, got into a kerfuffle or disagreement over what they were going to be doing with their protocol, and demanded, I guess, more money from Microsoft. And Microsoft said, nope, have fun doing that on your own. So from Vista, 8, Windows 10, Windows 7, all of those, they didn't have the IPX protocol included in them by default. So what you end up having to do is, because, of course, Novell ended up going under because they weren't getting their money anymore, their patents ended up getting bought by Microsoft, and then, Microsoft bought them out. Unfortunately, they didn't add IPX back in. Is that we have to use a workaround that takes the IPX protocol that Tachyon is spitting out, converts it to another protocol, and that allows you to still play that mode online. So a lot of technical discussion there, but it's not as bad as it seems. Keep in mind too that if you need help with any of this, or if you want to connect with other groups, you can easily do so through the Tachyon Facebook, which is here. Or you can also reach us at fringespace.org. And here on the sidebar, we have our Discord server link, which you can voice chat or text chat with us at pretty much any time of the day. We'll end up seeing the message because messages persist. Also, there is a community on Steam for Tachyon players. People tend to come and go. It's just the way it is. Also, a lot of what we're going to be grabbing from today in order to get this to work is going to be on the Fringe Space download page, and I'll have some of these links in the comments so you don't have to bounce around too far all over the internet. But if you have just a regular copy of Tachyon, that's what you'll pretty much need for this to begin with, is go ahead and install it. If it's under Windows XP, you'll have it just in the Programs folder. If it's on Vista, then you'll have to worry about it. If it's under 64-bit or not, you'll find it under the Program Files x86 folder. What we'll end up doing is patching it with at least probably the 36-hour quick updater, which, let me show you here real quick. See, I've got Tachyon Service Bay 2. I've got the 36R updater, which you can go ahead and patch immediately after you've got Tachyon installed initially. One of the things I like to do, particularly because I have several installs of Tachyon at any given time, is I've got one for the Arena mod that Service Bay creates that gives you extra ships, and your weapons aren't locked into certain slots anymore, and it gives you a lot more maps. Some other things. Base Wars mod is similar. It does certain things on its own like that and gives you a certain ship set, including the pirates. So, but it isn't compatible with Arena because of the different ship stats. So, what I like to do is have different folders for Tachyon. A vanilla one, Base Wars mod, Arena mod, etc. And then, just for the sake, because I'm constantly having to work with files and that, I keep a perfect working TAC copy here, the PWT folder, so that instead of having to reinstall from disk, anytime I need to, I can just go ahead and drag and drop files back over, and I've got another good working copy. This is a pretty good setup, like if you want to have multiple copies of TAC. Just do it once, update it, make sure it works like how you want it to, and then copy it to the other folders, and then mod them as needed. But that's getting kind of off topic. So, what I'm going to be using for my own copy of Tachyon is straight off the disk, updated to 36R using this patcher. It takes like 2 seconds. It's on the Fringe Space site, and we'll have links in the comments. Then I'll go ahead and use the Service Bay mod. That does not use the latest IP address, as I just showed you with the hex editor and all that there. It's still somewhat out of date, but that will give you mod ships if you want them. It will give you all the maps that are currently in play. It'll do some other tweaks and things to the system. So that's good enough to have in general anyway, because if you don't have the maps, when you load into somebody else's server, everything will be black in the background. You won't have any like stars or anything else. It'll just be really weird and dark, and all you'll see is somebody's thruster trails. This visual enhancements mod will give you a couple of different options for making Tachyon look a little bit more crisp, be sharper. It might pop a little bit more. Some of it works a little bit better too using the visual enhancements mod, because of the stretching on much larger screens of today. There's also some problems, I think, when Tachyon is switched over to DirectX type displays, which is pretty much everything nowadays, that didn't work because originally when Tachyon came out, it was for much older systems like the Voodoo cards and things like that from way back in the day. So the visual enhancements mod restores some things and makes it look better, but you'll see that here in a couple minutes once I get started with it. And lastly, our IPX wrapper, which we'll go into as we work through this. But again, if you have any trouble with anything, catch us on Discord or Facebook. You know, somebody, more than likely myself, will end up being able to help you with it. So, you've got your Tachyon, you've got it up to 36R, you've put your service bay or your visual enhancements mod, and as far as that goes, you can run a game. It works just fine. Not host, not necessarily join a game, but you can launch like single player, or you can do stuff on your own, and as far as it looks, it works fine. If you're up to that point, we can continue. So what we first want to do is take our Tachyon folder, which again on Windows XP, this is going to be in your program files folder, Nova Logic. Generally Tachyon is the default directory if you only have one install. If you are on Vista 64-bit or later, which is almost all 64-bit, it'll be in an x86 folder, then Nova Logic and Tachyon. So everything in here is, you know, straight. So what we're going to do is take our IPX wrapper, open it up, unzip it. And I'll have a link for this as well for the IPX wrapper from the creator's website. Or you can search for it. There's really only one website that has this out there. What we're essentially doing, besides installing an IPX wrapper, which is obvious, is we're installing IPX so that LAN mode works again, since IPX is not included in later versions of Windows. And we're going to sign up for the service called Tunngle, with two U's, Tungle, which is similar to how Hamachi and Kali.net used to work, where you create a direct connection or lobby between different people around the internet, and that all emulates being in the same house, essentially. So we're kind of faking the game out, making it think we're all in the same building when we're really across the planet. So what we're going to do here. Here's our install steps. Unpack our wrapper folder. We did that already. We need our registry version here. Just double click it. Go ahead and select yes. And drop all your DLLs, which we can change to this as soon as we stretch it out tight. Take all our DLL files and IPX config. Now, as it says here in my little write-up sheet, make sure if you have multiple copies of Tachyon, like Arena, Base Wars, Regular, and you're wanting to set all these up to run properly, make sure it is per folder that you do this, and go ahead and then drop the install files. Without these files in each game folder, it will not work. It's not like global across your whole computer. It's only for where you stick it. There's too many windows open. There we go. Now you can read it. So you'd go ahead and run IPX config once it's in there. Here your primary interface is going to be different from mine. I've got a gaming motherboard, so it's got a killer E2200 controller on it. As you can see, there's wireless adapters, there's other types of adapters in here since I've already got Tunngle installed. What you want is the main one that your computer is connected by. Now, if you're connected to your router or modem or internet in general by a cable plugged into your computer, then you're going to be looking for an Ethernet device. Let's say controller, device, something. Maybe it might be abbreviated on a laptop as like ETH0. That's not uncommon. So if it's by cable, you're going to want an Ethernet. If you are using Wi-Fi, which isn't really the best idea in the world, but if that's what you got to use it. You probably have an Intel or maybe a Realtek, other type of device controller. Like here I've got an Intel Centrino Wireless. Look for something with that kind of name. If not, look up the names on Google. You'll figure out real quick which one it is. I'm connected by cable, so I'm going to use the Ethernet controller as the primary one. That's what we need, is to select whatever we're really using all the time. Our primary connection method is what it means. From network adapters, pick wildcard interface. Make sure your enable interface is connected. These will fill on their own, so you don't have to worry about filling them in. Broadcast port is going to be 54792. Check the Windows 95 broadcast bug is selected. Most of this will take care of itself. Automatically create Windows firewall exceptions. Make sure that's checked. Otherwise, you may not be able to get out. You'd have to do everything manually. It's a pain in the butt. Don't do that. Go ahead, apply. Hit OK. Now this folder should be done. Something to note is that if it doesn't work or your system doesn't have IPX installed, is that when you go to host a game under IPX and Tachyon, it'll immediately give you an error message in the bottom right hand corner saying error, like network couldn't be connected or created, something to that effect. But it'll immediately error out. You won't even start a game. It won't even look for it. It'll just error immediately. So you know it's not working if that's the case. So for Vista 7, 10, that's what you needed to do right there, is just install the IPX wrapper. You do not need to have the update I have on the French base site for this lobby patch. The lobby patch does apply the newest IP address so you can find the Nova World lobby, but unfortunately, like I said, it's unstable and most of the time it doesn't work. Lobby half the time is not online on Sunday for some reason, so I would just say ignore the lobby patch for now. Now also, if you're on Windows XP, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. On Windows XP again, sometimes the IPX protocol is not enabled or immediately installed, so you have to go ahead and set that up. On Windows XP, you would go into your control panel and then network connections, and then find your local area connection. Again, generally it's Ethernet, or like in this picture, it's a Realtek Ethernet NIC. This is the cabled connection again. So whatever your primary method of connecting to the internet is. Go in there, right click it, pick properties. You'll end up with a box very similar to this, almost exactly. Scroll down through it and see if you don't have a NWLink, IPX, SPX item in this list and that it is checked. If it is not, then you don't have IPX installed and you will need it. So go ahead and hit your install button, look in the protocols list, and then find IPX and go ahead and follow the prompts to install that. That'll put it in the list. Make sure it's checked, it's running, it's there, it's good. That's all fine for Windows XP. That's not something, again, that you need to do for Vista and later, because you can't actually install IPX because it's not certified for later versions of Windows. It just will error out and it won't work at all. So make sure you've got that. If you're running an old XP box, might be a good idea to try and update. Just saying. But you can get rid of that. And then you can go ahead and do all these steps with the IPX wrapper, because if you don't, it can't spit IPX packets to the wrapper to get it to work. So there you go. Also worthy of note, if you need to clear ports if you're going to host a game, or maybe you're having trouble connecting, if in your router you're having some problems, like you're getting a firewall that's blocking, I've checked and it seems to use these ports, the 54792 that we just saw from the IPX config program, and then these other 62046, 62049, 62050. All of those ports over UDP appear to be what the wrapper is using. So if you need to clear them, go into the port forwarding section of your router control panel and do so. Otherwise, there's plenty of websites out there. If you Google search your router model number and port forwarding, that will tell you how to do that, or you can look in your manual. Easy peasy, actually. Sounds much more complicated than it is. So, we'll get that out of the way. Next thing, since we've got IPX configured, it's in here now, Tachyon should be all happy and peachy. We're going to go ahead and get our Tunngle set up. Now, Tunngle website, simply tunngle.net. Again, it's got Tunngle, so it's got two N's, not two U's. You don't need to pay for it, pretty much. Just go ahead and do their basic setup here. Go ahead and download it. And once you've got it installed, you can go through and it'll figure out that you're a new user. Set up an account name, whatever your screen handle you want to use. Go ahead, let it install. It works on pretty much any fairly recent system. Weird pop-up ad. The only difference with Tunngle, which I'll get to in just a minute, between these paid versions that might impact you somewhat, is that on the paid ones you can have a server game listed for everyone to see out in the global server list, so you can easily access it and find it by searching, whereas a unpaid user, you have to know that it's already kind of running and know where to connect to it at the proper name. So not as bad as it sounds, especially if we follow the Facebook and we say we've got a game up and here's the game name, and you can just join that way. So install Tunngle. It will go ahead and launch, which we shall do so. Now, Tunngle is ad supported, so they have ads in the window, as well as when you shut it off, it will pop up an ad you can't get rid of. So it is what it is. And of course, they've got a new Tunngle version out right as I try to do this video. Okay, back. Now that I've got this new version of Tunngle installed, hopefully I won't have to reboot. So, once you're in there, you can set it to auto login. It'll get you right in. Now, about what I was mentioning just a moment ago, paid users can go ahead and when they create a server lobby, it will get listed in like these public lists, and you can search for it. Like there's one that I know that runs the Blur for the Blur racing game. You can see it tells you how many people are online, yada yada yada. That's if you have a paid premium account. It will give you that option and it will be persistent. For us, what you want to do, if you are hosting a game, go ahead and go to Private Networks, Create. You'll have a network type of Basic. You can name it Tachyon or something else, but you know, being obvious would be preferable and easy to spell, so Tachyon works. You want to go ahead, if you want to set a password so that people can't join the lobby without knowing the password and have a private, really private game, you can add one here. For network range, you want to set this to 192.168 because that's pretty much what every in-home network runs off of. That's fine. Then go ahead and use a create, like so. And it'll sit here, it'll think for a moment, it'll go through, it'll say it's joined, and then you have your user list over here of people that are in your server, or at least in the lobby. They're not in the game yet necessarily, but they're in the lobby, and then you have text chat over there. Now, if you want to join an existing game, you again will go to Private Networks, in this case join. It gives you the same panel, there's no difference. You go to, again, network type Basic, and the network name. So if I'm hosting a server and the server's called Fringe Space, or if it's called Tachyon, and you want to join it, whatever it's called, and people know that's what I'm hosting, you need to put in the name here. Again, if I've got a password on it for some reason, go ahead and fill that in, and then you'll hit join, and it'll do the same thing where it drops you into a menu, which we'll use this as an example here. And you'll end up in a room with several people and be able to go ahead and start your game. Once you're in this lobby, you are connected to everybody else in the list. So again, it's just kind of like a placeholder. It gives you just a lobby connection at that point. So once you've got that established, just leave it there. You can hit play if you want. That'll give you a menu to launch games, but it's not really set up for Tachyon, so my suggestion would still be use your icons on your desktop. It's simpler and faster and makes more sense. So leave Tunngle open in the background, launch Tachyon. So we've got Tachyon open now. As I mentioned before, if your Tachyon does not look this good, it's probably because you don't have the visual enhancements mod applied to TAC. It could be more muddy, it could, not look as sharp. That's because of that. So, we've got our IPX adapter set up, particularly if we're on Windows XP. You've got the IPX wrapper installed on any version of Windows, and we've got Tunngle installed. You've got a user account, and you are in a lobby, whether it's my lobby or your lobby or somebody else's lobby, and you're in there, and Tungle's running in the background, and we've got Tachyon now playing. So go to your multiplayer. You've got your account set up. You've got a picture, your general options. And if you're going to play a Base Wars game, pick which side you would prefer to be on. If there's already too many people on one side for it to be even, you'll automatically get punted to the other side. And you can also select which ship you want. If you're playing Arena, go ahead and set up a ship with weapons and hardware cards, you will want at least these kind of loadouts for your ships. Some ships have less slots, some have more. Like this one, it's only got 2 slots. It's terrible. It's a really tiny ship. But you've got a combat scanner, you've got lateral thrust, that's very necessary. Boosters, very helpful. And your reserve cards. Ammo reserve, shield reserve, laser reserves. Optional ones are going to be the EW jammer, which is supposedly makes it harder for people to get a lock on you. In practice, that's not really true, but sometimes it helps. And fog radar, which if you happen to be on a map with fog, most of the fog has been removed from the game at this point, so kind of usefulness, but there's not really much else in here that's really all that useful. So other than maybe the burn-off device if somebody in the game is throwing sappers at you. You've also got these 2 slots are the only 2 slots that you can use an afterburner in, and the afterburner reserve. You know, if to give an example here, if you take this out, you can go ahead and actually drop most of any of these on these slots in the mod versions of TAC, but it doesn't actually function if you stick it there. So afterburner reserve, or vice versa in these 2 holes, and whatever other ship cards in here. Weaponry, that's kind of personal taste, but generally you want heavy lasers, like the heavy mining laser or the heavy laser for the Galspan. Most of your Bora or people that run mod ships are going to be using plasma rockets and railguns in some capacity. It's quick, it's fast, it hits pretty hard. Really competent players will use Solaris torpedoes, which we can go take a look at. Those Solaris torpedoes are very difficult to use. There's the most heavy laser. Some people will use sunspots or swarm missiles, although missiles have been kind of negatively looked on in games other than base wars. So people try to request others don't use them, but you know, to each their own. There's plenty of ways of getting around and killing you if you're using missiles or not. So that's a basic setup. Now, if you're hosting a game and you need to set one up, go to host, set up a game name. If you want another game password, which is kind of pointless when you're using Tunngle because you already had a password there probably to keep people from getting in at all, or if you want to let them into your lobby in Tunngle so they can talk, but you don't want them in your game, set up a game password, but don't set up a password for Tunngle, or it's just peachy. We're going to change the game protocol, plan IPX game, that way it works over Tunngle. You got your game mode, which is Arena or Base Wars. There's plenty of maps here when you have the mod packs. When you don't have a mod pack, there's like 5 or 6 maps at the most. It stops literally right there. Serve and play, if you are going to play and host at the same time, if you're running a second computer, then you can just do serve only, or if you're just going to leave it there for other people to use, again, serve only will give you just kind of a control panel, whereas serve and play will let you actually play. Let's pick a different map here. We'll use that. Max players, 32 is fine. Any computer nowadays can hold that many players. There's probably not 32 people online at any given time that can actually play. Host options, you can change rounds, power-ups, time limit. All this stuff is self-explanatory. It's a little bit different for Base Wars, where you get some more options. But again, you know, whatever you want to end up doing. So again, you've got it set up as IPX game. You've got it as host. So we'll show that off real quick. Now, because I'm using the option 2 visual enhancements mod, I have a bug where my ship spins whenever I enter the game on the first try. So you have to Alt-Tab out. But it works. Works pretty good. Now, vice versa. If you're trying to join a game over IPX, over Tunngle, you want to go to play. Don't worry about the Nova World tab. Nova World doesn't work. Go to IPX. And you'll just sit here at this screen and do search. Now, if you're in the Tunngle lobby and somebody is hosting a game, it should pop up in this list almost immediately, or at least within a few seconds. If it's like over 5 to 10 seconds and nothing is in this list, there's probably no one hosting, or you have a port problem where it's not going to connect, and you need to, look at the ports, look at your firewall, look at your internet connection, make sure Tungle's working properly. As long as those things are all good, it should show up in this list. Right now, no one else is hosting a game, so it's not showing up here. But you'll end up with a name like Tachyon or, Fringe Space, JG Server, whatever. Will show up in here, and you just select it and hit join, and you'll go right into the match. Just like Nova World used to do, just like anything else, or how I just demonstrated with hosting a game there. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Now I'll go in one footnote here about the IPX protocol before we leave off, is that because it wasn't designed for long distance communications across the world, across the country, things of that nature, it may end up having where there's more lag in a Tunngle game than maybe what you would have experienced on Nova World. It's a possibility, particularly if you're in a different country. Like, there are a lot of people that play in Europe and Italy and over in that area. Really, Tachyon has been played on every continent on this planet and in most major cities. So there's players pretty much everywhere. But you've got a lot of people in the United States, and then you've got a lot of people over in Europe. Those are probably the main two centers or hubs. So it's not uncommon to see a player from over there playing with players in the US, and you'll get some lag because of that. It is an old game. We are kind of cheating the system, getting this to work in this way. There's not really much you can do about it. If it's unplayable or it causes problems for people, the best thing you can really do is set up your own local server and play with people in your region. Have a Europe server and people play over there at the time of day that they're able to, or morning or night, and have the US players play over in their region with their group, and everybody would be easier to play with. You can't really change your internet connection unless you go with something like a better quality connection, like instead of being on dial-up, you go up to cable, or from cable up to fiber, and so on and so forth. So, but again, if there's anything else that you need, get a hold of us on Facebook, or get a hold of us on our Discord server, and we'll try and give you a hand as to figuring it out. I hope that helped, although it was a little rambly and disjointed at times, but we'll see you in the game. JG out.